And here we are back on the radio once again and enjoying every minute of it. By the way, I have to tell you, the heat's on right now, and yours truly is kind of taking it casual. Well, that's not the only reason, but as you can see, if you're looking at this on the internet, I'm in the coolest place you could ever possibly want to be. And luckily for me, I'm here by myself and Mr. Producer. And today we're going to talk about some things that I would promise you probably know nothing about, or not very much. Or maybe you think you know more than you really should know, or maybe you really don't know anyway. Well, first thing I want to talk about here is this issue of transparency. Now, I appeared before the county commission meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was important to read them what the Nevada state law says about transparency. And the reason I felt that that was what needed to be done, sometimes I think the commissioners and their advisors forget that it's not their county, it's our county. Yours and mine, if we live here. And it ain't much of a county. It's only 7 square miles. That's not really true. We are 7% of Nye County actually belongs to the county. 93% of Nye County belongs to everybody in the country. And you may think that somebody from New York doesn't own a piece of Nye County. But here's the deal, folks. We were originally a territory. And when they created Nevada, the federal government retained 87% of the territorial lands for the federal government located on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and they left us with a measly 13% of the state of Nevada to be run by the people who live here. However, here in Nye County, as we are the third largest county in the country, that's a lot of land. And what did they do? They kept 93% of the land here in Nye County for the federal government and the rest of the country to determine how we should live. Now, there are some things that we could get into about, is that fair? Fairness does not enter into politics. The only thing that enters into politics is winning. As Donald Trump was used to say, that's the only thing, is winning. Everything follows afterwards. We lost the battle to have all of our lands within the border of Nevada controlled by us, the Nevadans. Now, I hear people say, oh my gosh, if the federal government wasn't taking care of our lands, we would go bankrupt. But remember, I told you we're the third largest county. The largest county is San Bernardino County. And really, if you want to know what we should do, you should look at the two largest counties and see how they fare. Now, I don't want to do that on the radio show today. That might be a whole additional discussion. But I wanted to get into this thing about transparency in government. That's really where I'm headed. So the first transparent thing is Nye County only owns and controls 7% of the land within our border of Nye County. Even though we're a really, really big county, we don't control much of it. There is a question of equal footing between the states, and when the states in the East Coast, east of the Mississippi, created Nevada, accepted it, they didn't give us control of our land. If you're new to Nye County, wise up. You're living in a county that the commissioners can only decide what happens on 7% of the land in Nye County. So, in the interest of transparency, I wanted to read a statement to the commissioners. And this is the statement I read. This is, by the way, I read this because this is exactly what it says in the law. So it's not like it's my opinion. It is the law. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not practicing law here. I'm only reading what it says in the law and giving you my opinion. So, in the interest, it starts off with, in the interest of open government and transparency, truth in events and the resolution of incomplete information and investigation of events affecting our trust in those who govern us, the citizens of Nye County, I submit the following excerpt from Nevada law for consideration and possible future action by you all who are representatives in the great Nevada Republic, such as it is. Now, we have laws that are called Nevada Revised Statutes. Basically, that's like the laws in California, which are not called revised statutes. And for short, they're called NRSs, the Nevada Revised Statute. And the one I want to talk about is 239.001. And it has to do, the heading says, Legislative Findings and Declaration. The legislature hereby finds and declares that, number one, the purpose of this chapter is to foster democratic principles by providing members of the public with prompt access to inspect, copy, or receive a copy of public books and records to the extent permitted by law. Now, I have a problem with that statement. It's not to foster democratic principles. There's a Democratic Party. That word does not belong in there because I am not following the Democratic Party's principles. It should say something to the effect of to foster the principles as outlined in the Nevada and U.S. Constitution. Let's put the tail on the donkey. Let's change the wording. And if you are out there and you are a legislator or you're a commissioner, how about that's the first part of the wording we fix? It should not foster democratic principles. Now, they have it as a small d. I don't care. Every time I hear the word democratic, my ears perk up. And there's a reason for that. We live in a republic. We don't live in a democracy. We have a democracy as far as how we vote. But we vote representatives to go to the government to manage our affairs. So I am not ready to see them foster democratic principles. I went in to foster principles as outlined specifically in the U.S. Constitution and the Nevada Republic's Constitution. And that's another thing. We are a republic. The United States Constitution guarantees you the right of a Republican form of government. No state can be admitted without having a Republican form of government. Maybe you Democrats didn't know that. But that's where it's at. Okay, so then there's number two. The provision of this chapter must be construed liberally to carry out this important purpose. Now, I have to tell you, normally the word liberally is bad language, but in this particular case, what they're saying is there should be less restrictions on this issue of transparency in government. Item 3 said, any exception or balancing of interests which limits or restricts access to public books and records by members of the public must be construed narrowly. Now, I like that. They're saying if you ask to see a document or information, then it has to be a very narrow area where you are restricted. And I can tell you, There were times when people have gone to government here in Nye County and asked for information and couldn't get it, or it took forever to get it. You have to know how to ask for the right information. So that applies. You have a liberal construction of transparency, and you have a narrow construction of what they can hold back from you. And there was a time here in Nevada, if you wanted to know how much the salaries were for various individuals, how much they made every year, you couldn't find it. And in the year 2011, they used to publish the county treasurer, John Perdant, and the people before him have always had to, by law, publish all the checks that they issued for a 3-month period every quarter. They used to publish that in a newspaper, many, many pages. It had everybody's salary in it. It had how much they got per month. I mean, all the checks, whatever was written. I went through that in 2011, and I picked out every name, and I calculated their income. And let me tell you what, I was within 2% of what everybody made. I figured it out, and it was simple. So there was a time they didn't want to tell us that. But along came the Nevada Policy Research Institute, and they sued the state of Nevada. And they asked the state, or they demanded in court, in the Supreme Court of the state of Nevada, that financial information paid for by us as the taxpayers had to be made public. No more was there a secret. And I can tell you in 2011, before that was passed, I looked at people's income, and with benefits and salary, Dave Fanning, who used to run public works in this county, pulled $210,000 in 1 year. That's the first year I looked at it. Now, to me, that's a pretty hefty salary for Nye County when all we really have control of is 7% of the land in the county. So you figure it out. How many other counties are actually paying that kind of money to somebody who is the public works manager? So it goes a lot further than that. And they have passed new laws about this transparency business. Not that I can see that I'd be happy with, but maybe I'll get to that at the end of what I'm telling you here. Then item 4 says, the use of private entities in the provision of public services must not deprive members of the public access to inspect, copy, or receive a copy of books and records relating to the provision of those services. And it goes on to number 5. I want to finish this part first. The federal government these days and other governments are contracting services out thinking that you can't have access to that information. But if they're being paid, they're getting government money. According to this, it says it must not deprive members of the public, us as citizens, access to inspect, copy, or receive a copy of the books and records relating to provision of those services. So keep that in mind. If Nye County contracts with somebody to build a road, the way I read this, we should have access to the documentation about costs and salaries and everything else, just like the government has to give us. Then there's item 5. Now, if I'm wrong about that, in another show, I will admit to my error, but I'll give you 10 to 1 to have a tough time arguing that. And number 5 was, if a public book or record is declared by law to be open to the public, such a declaration does not imply and must not be construed to mean that a public book or a record is confidential if it is not declared by law to be open to the public and is not otherwise declared by law to be confidential. Now, I read this to the commissioners at the podium at that meeting, and I turned in this exact document. Now, I know approximately how long it takes for the minutes to be prepared and published on the county website. So I have that date set in my phone to go in and look and see if my statement is there. And I requested in writing that the document I just read to you be included in their official minutes and placed in the proper sequence it has been presented herewith. Now, what does that mean? It means that, yeah, the law says they have to take my document and put it in the minutes. But I want this document to be put in the minutes in the sequence that occurred during the meeting. Because you don't have the option to say, oh, well, he made that comment in the beginning of the meeting, but we don't like it, so we'll put it at the end of the minutes so nobody will see it. Nuh-uh-uh. If that happens, we have an interesting case to go to court with. That's a violation of proper transparency. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. That is my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, so there's a lot more to be said about transparency, by the way. And I'm always interested in hearing from my listeners if you have a comment about transparency here in Nye County or even in the state of Nevada. As you know, my shows and the breakfast that I do is really all about what happens in Nye County and in Nevada. I don't care what happens at the national level for those two issues, only if it affects us here in Nye County. This is where I live. If Portland wants to have peaceful demonstrations where they burn down buildings and raid stores and steal the proprietor's inventory, that's fine. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is they didn't go to the banks to steal anything. Do you ever wonder about that? How come, I'm off on a tangent here, but I can't resist. How come they riot and burn down the shop owners who provide them the very services, food and clothing and gadgets that people want, and then complain that the stores don't have anything and that the stores pull out of their neighborhood? What a bunch of stupid idiots. I don't use the word stupid very often, but in this particular case, I think they're brain dead. I think they'll follow. If somebody comes to them and says, hey, let's go down the street and let's raid John's liquor store, and somebody else comes along and says, well, wait a minute, you go down there, you get a couple of bottles of liquor. Let's go down to the bank. Jesus, that's where all the money is. Let's go in there and do that. Somebody tell me when the last time was a bank was destroyed in a riot. As Willie Sutton said, that's where the money is. Who was Willie Sutton? Well, you had to be around a lot of years ago, but he was a crook. And they asked him when he was in jail, why do you rob the banks? And he said, that's because where the money is. So, okay. I want to make an announcement here. It's about love letters. Did you ever write a love letter to your sweetie? Or a Valentine's note that made her tear up? Well, there's a play that's going to be put on at the Sanders Winery, which is down on Kellogg Avenue on the south end of town. It's the Kellogg Winery. And the play centers on two characters, Melissa Gardner and Andrew Makepeace Ladd III. How's that for a name? And it covers a period of 60 years through shared correspondence from grade school Valentines to postcards to letters. Seated side by side at tables but separated by distance, they read their letters in which they discuss their hopes, dreams, ambitions, disappointments, victories, and defeats. All that has passed between them throughout their separate lives. When you were young, did you have a sweetheart that you broke up and you often wondered what happened to her? I have a little story about that. And the finality of Melissa's and Andrew's correspondence brings them to the realization that their exchanges were really love letters all along. Now, who's going to play the parts here? There's two parts. Andrew Makepeace Ladd III. I don't know who the hell came up with that name, but the guy must be one of those rich aristocrats, from what I can tell, who's kind of la-di-da. And his playing that part will be a local celebrity, Bill New Year. And Bill is well known in town, and he does a lot of good things around here. If you have old eyeglasses you don't need anymore, he collects them, and they do some things so people can have eyeglasses. And then the part of Melissa Gardner will be played by longtime resident Linda DeMeo. Now, when the heck is this going to take place? July 16th and July 17th. That's this year, 2021. Again, mark your calendar, July 16 and 17. And call up for tickets. It's $25 per person. Don't ask me to borrow the money to go. You'll have to use your own. But it's out of the Pahrump Valley Lions are sponsoring this. So if you know a Lion, or you can contact Bill New Year. Oddly enough, I find that on this flyer that I had, they didn't put a phone number. Oh, here it is. Let me give you a phone number. I just found it. Boy, talk about having to read stuff. For reservations, contact Bill New Year, 661-406-5502. Again, that's 661-406-5502. Or you can email Bill, but I think if you email it and he doesn't read it or misses it, you're out of luck, to BNEW, New Year, at att.net. Okay, so that's about all I have to say on it. It should be a fun evening. Since it's at the winery, after a couple of glasses of wine, I'm sure you'll enjoy the show even more. Now, on to some of the more interesting stuff. I probably should have told you guys what I was going to talk about today, because I went to a meeting recently, and this meeting was the Nye County Strategic Planning Community Workshop. That's a mouthful. The initials are NCSPCW. Evidently, it's an acronym that they don't have a word for. And it was taking place on Tuesday, June 29th. Now, the interesting thing about this notice was that you had to notify them by June 28th that you'd be attending. And I'm not the only one, so I feel good about this. But I showed up on June 28th, and there was no one there because it was actually June 29th when they were going to have the meeting. So, and I commented to someone that I was missing in action the first day. So anyway, I was not the only one this happened to. And I have to tell you, when I went there, I'm not sure what to expect. You know, you go to a meeting, and when they say, I always wondered, strategic planning, what's the matter with regular planning? What's the difference between strategic planning and planning? Now, in my slowly developing brain, planning means you have a strategy on what you want to accomplish for the coming year. So why do we have to have strategic planning? Planning is about planning. How can you plan if you don't have a strategy? Why does it have to be strategic planning? I think they should take that word. I'm offended. I said, there you go. There's the solution. I'm offended by using the word strategic. Let's just stick with planning, because strategic makes it sound like you're really doing something. And I'll tell you, all that went on was a lot of discussion about what should we do? What does Nye County need? Well, I listened to a lot of people. There was, by my count, 18 people at this meeting. And The man putting it on was for UNR. His name was Fred Steinman. I always believe we should know people's names and how to contact them, because if you don't know the names, how do you identify what's being done and by whom? If I told you some guy was there from UNR, what would you know? You wouldn't know anything. But now you know it's Fred Steinman. And Fred's email address is Fred, how unusual is that, at unr.edu. Again, that's Fred at unr.edu. And he also gave us his phone number. I bet he's going to regret that. And that's 775-784-1655. Now, I am assured that not everyone could attend that meeting that would have liked to. But I'm going to post up on my Facebook page what they were looking to cover in that workshop and who should attend. And technically, anybody who has an opinion about what Nye County needs should have attended. Now, when you go to one of these meetings, you would expect that there would be an equal number of people speaking from the left and right-hand side of the room. When I conduct the men's breakfast, I'm like the moderator. And when I'm doing that, I make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. And sometimes I'm not the best at it. Sometimes I make a mistake, but I'm human. That's the first thing I will admit. But we have some rules at breakfast. You want to talk? You put a finger up. One finger means you want to be on the topic. Two, you want to change the topic. So if everybody's got one finger up and somebody puts up two fingers, they're going to have to wait to change the topic till we get done talking about the other things. And if you haven't spoken yet and the other people have, you're next. I kind of like that process because it puts an orderly way of discussing a topic. But at this particular meeting, I started to get the feeling that only one eye worked for the moderator because he kept calling on people on the right-hand side of the room. You could put your hand up on the left-hand side, and it's like, we must be the Democrats on the left-hand side. We shouldn't call on them. And the people on the right-hand side are the conservatives, so I'll call on them. But it didn't work that way. Here's what I saw as the people who attended. They all had skin in the game of getting government money for a project. There were very few of us there, in my mind, three, who were more concerned about how the money got spent, how much money was spent, and when they ask about what do we think are the benefits, pros and cons of Nye County and so forth, very few of us. The others all wanted to talk about we should have sleeping quarters for the homeless. We should have free food because they don't have enough food to eat. All kinds. We should do things for the kids. The kids don't have enough to do here. Things like that. So when I heard one of the things about we need more stuff for the kids to do, I made a list while I was sitting there. Now, I was raised in the country. Many people that I know that live in Pahrump like this lifestyle because they were raised in it. Even if you talk to Tim Hafen when he was a kid and they lived out here, what did they do? This is the desert. They must have been doing something because they didn't have what we have today for entertainment. So I made a list. Here's what we did as a kid. We played stickball, and that meant you got a broom handle and you got a rubber ball, like a tennis ball or something, and you played stickball. We used to play it under a railroad trestle, and there would be cars going by, but we played. We would play marbles. You can still play marbles. We used to play kick the can. We used to build tree forts. In my youth, we built 40 different kinds of tree forts. It was fun to build. And we did it as a group, as kids, and we all cooperated and we figured out how to do stuff. There's 4-H here in town in Pahrump, and they have a robotics team. There's not only husbandry, they got other stuff going on. We used to play baseball. We'd get a pickup game. And there wouldn't be enough, we didn't have 9 kids on each team. We had less, but we still could play. We'd go down to the local ball field by ourselves, our own bats, our own ball, and we would play. I never wanted to pitch because I figured you might get beamed, but I played. I was good at it, and I liked playing the outfield because that's where the balls all went. Then there's track. If you want to do track, there's all kinds of events that you can do in track. There's basketball, there's horseshoes, there's internships. You want to learn a trade, you want to go get an education, you want a free education? I'll tell you what, being an intern gets you into the marketplace as an employee. Maybe you don't get any money right away, but you learn how to do the things you need to know so you can get a job. There are startup jobs, things like Burger King and Jack in the Box, places like that. Even going to the supermarkets, if you're reliable and we can count on you, you should be able to get a job. The Chinese and the Japanese have mental competitions. Now, we used to have those when I was a kid. They had spelling bees. It doesn't have to be just spelling. When I went to school as a kid, we would have math competitions. I was good at that. As a matter of fact, when they would call on different students to go up to the board to do the math, and the teacher would give them the numbers to calculate, once I got up there, that was the end of it. I was always the last man standing. I was indomitable. And then there's learning about the history of Nye County. Whoa, it's great here. There's no understanding of what the heck actually lives in Nye County, who's here and what they do and what they did. You could go prospecting here. As a teenager, as a young person, you could go out with your folks, and 25 miles north of town, there were gold out there. There were gold mines out there. The Johnny Mine alone in 1906 produced $1 million in gold that they know of. And in 1906, gold was worth real money. There's the internet. With the internet, you could have friends over, you could watch some movies, you could play some games, and all kinds of stuff. There's soccer, there's tennis, there's swimming, there's skate. We built a skateboard park for the kids. Needs some repair right now. I went to look at it recently, but it's there. There's card games. We used to play all kinds of card games as kids. We just sat around and played. As a matter of fact, as adults in the military in Spain, in the middle of the hottest days of the year, no air conditioning, we would play hearts 24 hours. There's bowling in town. I mean, there's so many things. Why do parents say there's nothing for my kids to do? I have the answer. They don't want to do any of these things. They want to go to the arcade and play games. Buy them a Wii. Let them stay at home. They won't get in trouble. So when I heard all of these folks wanting to do things for other people, I think what they should really be doing is hoping those other people do the things they want to do on their own. They talked about food distribution. There are people here who know about this, that in food distribution, some people will go to one distribution outlet and then they'll leave and they go to another one. And they're driving good cars. They're not poor. The poor sometimes will stand out on the corner and ask you for money. And I've seen them go shopping in Smith's or Walmart. So when I saw this strategic planning deal, I had a couple of things I brought up. For instance, what do I like about Nevada and Nye County? I like the fact that Nye County is a Second Amendment county. We believe in gun ownership, the right to carry guns, and the right to use it to defend yourself if you need to. I like that, and I stated that at the meeting. That's on the list. So Another thing that I liked, I heard everybody talking about having more people move here, having more benefits, more fix the roads right away, do all kinds of stuff. Nobody ever said where the money's coming from. So I stood up and I said, one of the things I like about Nye County is I want low taxes. I don't want to be California. I don't want to be New York. I don't want to be Chicago. I want to be Nye County like I moved here for the lower taxes and the lower cost of living. Now, if you didn't attend that meeting because you couldn't or didn't know about it, again, in the earlier part of the show, I gave you Fred Steinman, his email and his phone number. I'm going to give it to you again. His phone number is 775-784-1655. And his email is Fred. How unique is that? No, it's just Fred. Forget the rest of it. Fred at unr.edu. So I was not uncomfortable sitting in a room full of do-gooders. I don't fault them for wanting to do good, but giving people things doesn't give them any incentive to do for themselves. And I know people for many, many years that wanted to work. When I owned a real estate office in California, there was a woman named Kim. And Kim had loss of oxygen to the brain during birth. And so she had limited mobility. As a matter of fact, she was totally in an electric wheelchair. She could speak, she could talk on the phone, but she wasn't good at feeding herself. She had to have an attendant 24 hours a day. The thing Kim wanted the most was to work. So my son was working with us in the company at the time, and he came to me one day. He said, Dad, I really would like to hire this young lady. She was 21 because she really wants to work, and I think I can use her in the company. And we hired her. And I have to tell you what, she had motivation to work. Here you've got people with good arms and legs, and they can talk, they can hear, they can see. And you know what? They want us to give them crap. Well, I don't want to give it to you. I want you to earn it, because you know what? When you earn it, it feels good that you could do that. When you get it for free, you have no respect for it because it was free. And every time I hear these days, free this and free that, free Willie. No, that was another story. There comes a time when you have great satisfaction of doing the things that you can succeed at. And you know, when something is really hard to do and you can do it, you have now learned a skill that most people don't have. Anyway, Kim worked for us for 6 months. We trained her on how to use the phone. And we set her up so she could have room in the office. We gave her space. She would help my son. And at 6 months, she decided that she wanted to move on to another type of work. And I got a call from the local newspaper in San Bernardino County, and she had applied there for a job. And they wanted to know what I thought. I asked them, what kind of work will she be doing? Oh, she'd be working on the phone, talking to potential customers. I said, that's a perfect job for her. She'd be great at it. She had a good personality, and nobody has to see the fact that she can't walk. I mean, there were times my son had to carry her to the bathroom because her nurse caretaker didn't show up. So that was her life. And the biggest enjoyment she got was achieving the ability to go to work. If you know somebody that's not working and they think it's okay not to work and it doesn't make any difference, you need to give them some help. And I don't mean give them some more money or give them some more food. I mean, help them go to work. I can tell you that I've heard from people in the past that I helped when they lost their job. And the biggest thing that they had when they lost their job was, what do I do now? And I got that phone call. There was a fellow named Tom Tassinelli. I will never forget Tom. He worked in inside sales for Lewis H. Hine Company out of Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. He worked out of the office in Clifton, New Jersey. And one day I was told by the fellow running the office that the company was going to let Tom go. So I talked to Tom about it. I said, Tom, you should go find yourself another job now. Don't wait. Well, he didn't. He said he didn't know what he would do if he lost his job. It's all he had. And then one day I'm at home working on some things for sales promotion, and I got a call from Tom. They let him go. You know, when you lose a job, it's devastating. It really is. It means they don't want you anymore. Tom asked me what he should do. And I said, look, Tom, just because you lost this job doesn't mean there isn't opportunity. You're just in the wrong position, the wrong fit for this company. So get yourself dressed, get a new suit, spiff yourself up a bit, start losing some weight because he was kind of chunky, beyond chunky, and go out there and start looking for a job. One of his interviews was with British Petroleum in New Jersey. And they liked Tom. They hired Tom at a good salary, better than what he was making before, and in a better position. And why did they hire Tom? Because the fellow who was in charge of the fleet of ships for Castrol Oil, which is British Petroleum, was going to retire in 5 years, and they wanted somebody they could groom to take his place. And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity. What a success story for somebody that was down in the dumps, lost his job, but he picked himself up by his bootstraps, screwed up his courage, and went out and looked. I had a lot of confidence in Tom. As far as I was concerned, he was a good guy. Knew his stuff, did a good job. But, you know, sometimes personalities don't click. So that was in 1967. 1967. I left New Jersey. I left Long Island, and I moved to California. In 1978, I got a phone call. I was living in California, and it was Tom. And I thought to myself, oh, don't tell me he's lost his job again. I asked him what happened. He said, Andy, remember they were going to promise me that I would be in charge of the fleet of ships? Well, I am. It didn't happen in 5 years. It took 7. But here I am. And I didn't know where you had moved to. I finally tracked you down, and I'm in San Francisco. And I really wanted to come out and see you, but I can't because I'm going out on one of the ships. But I just want to say thank you. So if you lose a job, there's a couple of reasons people lose jobs. And when I used to hire somebody, I would always say that I'm hiring you because I had a high school kid came to me. He was a senior. And he told me the reason he wanted to go to work with us was that he needed money so he could buy a car. Well, to my way of thinking, once he got the car, he'd be gone or he wouldn't be reliable. So anyway, I told him, I sat him down. I said, look, I'd really like to hire you, but you have to understand one thing. When I hire you, it's because I expect you to help this company make money. And if I ever call you in my office to tell you you can't work here anymore, it's because I feel that you're not helping us make money. And the reason we have to have everybody on board to making money is that that's how everybody gets paid. Now, that wasn't just, I had developed that philosophy from the fellow I worked for. His philosophy in the company was everybody sells. And that may sound kind of silly. I mean, people that work in the warehouse don't sell directly. But the philosophy was this. If somebody in the company makes a customer angry and doesn't give them the help they're asking for, or help them find the person to do it, we're going to lose that customer. So the philosophy is everybody in this company sells. Even though you don't have contact with the customer, you have to provide good service. If they provide good service, they'll be back. And that was how we looked at it with ourselves as well. And there was a fellow that worked for us in California. He came to me one day and said he wasn't making enough money working for me because of the position he had. He asked me he was going to leave, but he didn't know where to go. And I suggested a company to him that I knew would always hire new people because they were growing. He went over there, and 2 months later, he called me up to say, "Thank you for sending me to that company. I love working here." But both these people that I just told you about went to work for companies that liked them. If you're working for somebody that doesn't like you, doesn't like the way you work, what are you still there? Don't be afraid to make a move. But don't quit your day job until you get a new day job. I worked 6 months looking for a new job because I wanted to branch out from aircraft crew chief into sales. And I had a couple of offers, but it wasn't what I was looking for. So I went from a $6,000 a year job, which was pretty decent money, to $10,000 just by changing jobs. Okay, so anyway, all of this is coming about because of this strategic planning workshop. And I have to say that I think Fred's heart's in the right place on what he wants to accomplish, Fred Steinman, that is. And he is going to provide us with the results of the survey. He's going to consolidate things so you get a good picture of what it was about. I would like to hear more about economic development in Nye County, where we're bringing in good paying jobs, some light industry, some manufacturers. We can actually have people here that have businesses that virtually use no water, zero. They use the same amount of water as if you stayed home and sat around the house all day. So if you're sitting around the house all day and your county commissioners have not brought in those kinds of jobs, you need to go to their meeting. And at public comment, you need to say to the commissioners, look, I want to go to work, and I don't want to go to work for $5 or $7 an hour. I want to go to work at a good job, and I want to be technically competent to be able to do it. And in that regard, I want to compliment Great Basin College here in Peru. They have instituted a program where they bought 4 numerically controlled milling machines and all the attachments and tools that you need. It's an actual shop where they train students how to program and use those machines, how to make things. Making things makes money. And then I saw, and I have pictures of it because I went there for the grand opening. And they also have in that same program 4 3D printers and a class on how to write code for 3D printers. Now, maybe you don't think that's a big deal, but you got to have some vision in your life. You have to understand that coming down the road, controlling equipment where an operator does not have to do it, that it's all by artificial intelligence, that is already a big deal. I see it all the time. So if you want to get decent jobs and you want to get into the action, go to the commissioner meetings. Tell them you're sick and tired of them spending $4 million to build buildings when some lesser amount of money will do, and they should be spending that money to encourage companies to come here. I don't want to tell you a story about that. Frank Maurizio, Anthony Greco, and a man named Warren Pauliak and I were on the phone with a fella in California. I had tracked this guy down, and he was located in Irvine, California, and he had relocated 200 companies from California to other states. But there was not one company that he sent to Nevada out of 200. They skipped over Nevada and went to Texas. And we've got some good deals going here, folks. And we can accommodate them. So we're on the phone with him. And I don't know, this must be 8, 10 years ago. But the thing that we learned at most was we're having a great conversation with him about what we have to offer and what we can do. And all of a sudden, after 20 minutes, he says, hey, guys, are you with the government? And the first thought that came to my mind was, well, he don't want to deal with the government. It was exactly the reverse. If we were not part of the government, he had no interest in talking to us. And here in Nye County, the government had no interest in talking to him. Instead, they created a product called Eden, Economic Development for Esmeralda and Nye County. And we all used to complain about the fact they were accomplishing zero. The commission had heard from everybody that they were accomplishing zero. And yet they soldiered on until one day Esmeralda County said, you guys aren't worth anything. We're out. Don't call it Esmeralda and Nye County anymore. But they still kept the name Eden. I mean, it wasn't successful. Why shouldn't we keep it? It had no real value. And then 2 years later, Eden was gone. Now what do? Well, you create a new entity, just like Eden was. And we call it the Nye County Regional Economic Development Authority, INCREDA, which I have referred to many times as incredible. You can take that any way you want. Well, I could do a whole show just on that topic, but I just want to say that if you want good jobs, you have to go to the place that has some control over who comes here. And I want to tell you one other thing. In 2004, Nye County paid a consulting firm $40,000 and now in 2004, $40,000 was a good amount of money compared to today's $40,000. And they were to develop a plan for Nye County to develop a structure for their organization and government. And I have a copy of that report. And in that, by the way, when I first moved here, they didn't even have an organization chart. They had like 300 and some odd employees, and there was no organization chart about the different departments and how they worked and who was responsible to whom and so forth. They didn't have that. They had nothing. It was embarrassing. They weren't embarrassed. They felt good about it because the public did not have transparency. Anyway, this consulting firm, when they gave their report, put in the report that the county should have an individual responsible for economic development directly employed by the county and responsible to the county commission. But not this county commission. They chose to make a semi-independent organization, which in my opinion has not been very successful. And if you can tell me where their successes are, we can have a discussion about it. But as far as I'm concerned, the success has been minimal, other than they have some people in it. So I guess it depends on what you want to accomplish, but there it is. So I've kind of given you as much as I can today about this workshop and economic development and jobs and things. And I guess this is July 4th coming up. And there's going to be an event at the VFW on Saturday. If you want to know more about it, you might want to contact Bruce Schoenberger. He's putting it on. Should be a lot of fun. And I'm going to try and get his, he's got a short 4-minute video on it, which I'll try to get up on my website today. So that's about the only thing I have other than this. There's a radio show host on another station out of Las Vegas. And this particular individual, he must be the smartest person in the world. I mean, smarter than everyone else. He keeps telling people that they're stupid, that they're idiots. And they call in to have a discussion with him, and he doesn't want to hear what they have to say, because right away, if you don't like what they have to say, they're morons, they're idiots, they're imbeciles, you name it, on and on and on. And you ought to get off the air. Now, the last thing I'm going to tell you is what we did this morning at breakfast. We invited, actually, I didn't invite the sheriff of Nye County, Sharon Worley, let me know that we were going to have a guest speaker this morning, and he was coming out of the district attorney's office, because we're really interested in the guardians and how all that works in Nye County. And you should know that as well. So his name was Fred Richardson. I think I got that right. Let me look. I better double check. Boy, the last thing you want to do is to butcher somebody's name. Oh, my. Well, I think I got it right. He's with the district attorney's office. And we talked about the guardians. Maybe you don't know about the guardians, but you should. Now, there's two kinds of guardians. There are people that are appointed as guardians when you're unable to care for yourself, and the government can appoint through the courts a guardian to help you care for yourself. Then there's been another group of guardians that they have had the ability to go to court without you being there and have you declared essentially non compos mentis and take you away from your home and put you in a care facility, take your cell phone away, and not allow you to communicate with the outside world. Actually, there's a movie on YouTube, if you want to go look at it. YouTube? Netflix. Sorry. I think it's on Netflix. And it's called I Care About You. I think that's the name of it. We shall see. Anyway, we got this discussion at breakfast this morning about this particular issue. And I have always felt that when the county administrator or the guardian, if you will, goes to your house when you die and takes control of all your assets and your body, that you're at risk. So the discussion this morning with Fred from the DA's office was all about that. And I'll guarantee you there wasn't anybody in the room who knew everything that came up for discussion. And I have always felt, well, let me give you something here. I have Webster's dictionary. This is going to be real quick. The definition of chattel. Chattel is an item of tangible or immovable property except real estate and things, as buildings connected with real property. And then it goes on to say slave. We got to talk about that at another show. So next week, I'm going to get more into this business of chattel and slavery and guardians. And we'll kind of try and figure out maybe what you ought to do so that your assets don't disappear and that your surviving relatives are cared for. So with that, I'm Andy Alberti. Pick me up 5 days a week at 5 o'clock on this station, 98.1 FM. And have a great 4th of July. Go to the DAV on Saturday and enjoy the festivities. And with that, I am out of here. Thanks for listening.